Hey guys, this is the third video for my new series, Top Tips for Backpackers. My name is Abbie and thanks very much for joining me here today. Last week we looked at the top 10 things to consider when planning your first backpacking adventure. This week what I want to look at is the top 10 things to consider when you're actually on the trail. I'm kind of being strangled by my nipples right now. As I was saying, the top 10 things to consider when you're on the trail. As of last week, I have a list, just because it helps me kind of remember everything and keep things brief, because that's kind of important. I don't want to bore you to death. But there's another thing I want to add, and that is, as I mentioned, this is my new series. So I'm pretty excited to announce I'm going to be uploading a video every Sunday from now on. So check in on my channel on Sundays and there'll be a new video with tips for those of you who are getting into backpacking and tips for those of you that are just wanting to develop your backpacking and making it more fun. So be there, Sundays. Makes sense to start at the beginning with tip number 1, and that is hotspots. For me, I tend to develop hotspots on my shoulders, my hips and my feet. Hotspots are where the fabric, or say shoulder strap or whatever it may be, is rubbing against your skin and basically wearing it away. The ideal way to alleviate this is to put something in between the fabric and your skin that kind of takes the friction. So I buy these padded plasters that I put on my shoulders and my hips where they start to rub, and they work quite nicely. With my feet, I do something a bit different. I find the chunky plasters don't work, so instead I actually buy these special blaster plasters. That's quite a cool name, blaster plasters. Blaster, oh no, it's plaster blaster. Wait, what? Anyway, these little blister plasters. Bam, got it, yes. These little blister plasters, they go on your feet. They kind of are designed to be absolutely minimal, but they work quite nicely. And it just means, you know, you're not getting blisters because there's a big chunky plaster in your foot. One thing I will say is if you're wearing plasters in your feet or in your shoes, on your feet, then change them every night, just because it gets a bit gross and unhygienic. Of course, don't change them if it means you're going to pull off all your skin. To be honest, you be the judge of that. That kind of leads me on to tip number 2 quite nicely, which is personal hygiene. Often overlooked by a lot of people when they are backpacking, but personal hygiene is a must, it's an essential. If you know you're going to be camping at campsites that potentially, possibly, maybe might have a shower, get your hands on one of those really, really lightweight travel towels. I have one picked up Mountain Warehouse for about £4, which is, I'm going to guess, like $4 or $5, something like that. But they weigh absolutely nothing, and it just means if there's a shower, you can use it. I know a lot of people really like to rough it out when they're backpacking, but showers, this sounds so girly and stupid, but they really rejuvenate you after a day's backpacking. They really relax your muscles, they can help you sleep better, and of course that means the next day your walking is going to be so much more efficient, fun, enjoyable, and just better. So if there's a shower, I would really recommend using it. You don't even need to take any soaps or anything, just wash yourself down. Of course, if you're going to be wild camping, there are no showers. Well, I suppose it's the rain or waterfalls, but pretend you haven't got any of those. I would say take wet wipes, maybe 2 or 3 for each day. So if you're walking for 4 days, maybe take 8. But you know, just wash yourself down at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, which is what I like to do because it kind of gets me going in the morning. I'm like, right, you know, I've got walking to do, let's do this kind of thing. It just refreshes you. So personal hygiene is essential, and make sure you are hygienic. So tip number 3 is to pace yourself. A lot of these tips really are about listening to your body, and pacing yourself is essential. If you're tired, stop, take a break, eat something, drink something, let your body kind of recover, and just really pay attention to where it's screaming out at you to stop. Your knees are kind of a weak point where often, you know, that'll hurt, especially if you're going downhill for long periods. So just pay attention to how you're walking, you know, heel strike if you're going downhill. Use a stick if you need one, but don't become over-reliant on it. Let's just sum that up. Literally, pace yourself, pay attention to your body, and stop when you need to stop. Tip number 4 is kind of 2 tips. It's make sure you're drinking and eating enough. With regards to drinking, some people like to use the water bladders, which go in your pack, and the pipe comes over your shoulder. These guys kind of sip unconsciously on water all day, and that's fantastic. That's what you should be doing. If you have a bottle, just make sure you're consciously, unconsciously sipping throughout the day. You need to be drinking throughout the day. You need to make sure you're hydrated. And at the end of the day, ideally, not right before you go to bed because you need to pee, just make sure you completely hydrate yourself back up. Drink as much as you can. But as I said, do watch out for the horrible experience of having to pee in the middle of the night. With regards to food, make sure you're eating enough throughout the day. I'm not going to give you figures for the amount of calories you should be eating, but pay attention to the terrain. If you're in really rugged coastal or mountainous areas, you're obviously going to need to be eating more than if you're in a floodplain or any kind of flat area. So calories, make sure you're getting enough of them. And that leads me quite nicely onto tip number 5, which is if you need to resupply, if you can resupply, do resupply. Resupplying is not something you should feel guilty about. You know, when we were doing the Cumbria Way this summer, we reached Coniston and we just felt really tired. So we went into one of these little stores and bought some iced buns. Now the sugar of that completely revived us, and it just meant the rest of the day was really easy walking. It was a long way. It was at least another 12 miles to go at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it helped. And I would say resupply every opportunity you can when you need to. So don't force yourself to stay away from settlements unless you absolutely want to, because they can be useful if you do need to resupply. Tip number 6 is to pay attention to the weather. Now, you probably won't have access to the internet, so you won't be able to check the weather forecast, but in my opinion, when you're out and about, the weather forecasts are pointless, they're useless. Well, generally speaking. You are the forecaster because you are the one actually in the weather. You need to pay attention with your eyes and your other senses to the changing conditions. Look at the sky. Is it getting black and bleak and dark? Is it going to rain? Pay attention to the humidity levels around you. And generally just act on the changing weather conditions. So if you see that rain's coming over, be aware of your plan B, your route to get down to somewhere safer, get down to shelter. And again, that leads me quite nicely onto tip number 7, which is if you change your plan, make sure people know. Make sure those that are following your itinerary know that you've changed your plan just for safety reasons, so that if anything happens, they know where you are and all is well. Tip number 8 is with regards to navigation. If you feel like you generally have no idea where you are, stop. Okay, don't carry on, stop. Okay, maybe it's okay to pace on for a couple more steps because there may be a signpost, which here in the UK they often have the grid references on, but if you know you're somewhere where there's not going to be a signpost, stop, reassess the situation. Being lost for the first time is extremely freaky, so just have a sit down, have something to eat, have something to drink, calm yourself down, and then reassess the situation. Really try your best to read the landscape. And then obviously transfer that onto your map. Use your compass. As I mentioned in the last video, if you have a compass, you should know how to use it. And obviously they can be really useful to help you find out where you are. What I would say is when you're walking alone, it's extremely important to always be consciously aware of the landscape around you. Where are you on your map? If you're with somebody else, say there's a party of 2 or 3 of you, okay, it's alright to alternate navigation jobs, but you should always be aware roughly of where you are. Even if you're walking on a massive bridleway, you should still be like, oh, I'm roughly at this point here. It's just important for safety reasons so you don't get lost, and it gives you a bit more confidence. So navigation, if in doubt, stop and reassess. Tip number 9 is talk to people you meet on the trail. When you meet someone on the trail, you instantly have something in common. You both love backpacking or hiking, and you both love being outside. You can make some great friends when you're on the trail, but you can also get some good information out of them. You can find out what the upcoming trail is going to be like. Is it going to be boggy? Is it wet? Is it scree? And that can help you kind of judge whether or not to take a break at that certain point or further on. And it's just useful really to find out what the conditions are that are coming. And as I mentioned, you can make some great friends on the trail. So the final tip for today is something I mentioned on the last video, and that's to be organised. Everybody has their own systems. For me, as I mentioned last time, I have colour-coded dry bags in which I keep certain things. Now the importance of this is purely so that you can access things in emergency, you can get them in the dark, you can get things quickly. Say your tent blows down, you've got all these bags accessible, you can grab them and go. It's just really, really important to be organised, and you kind of know if you've lost something because you're like, hang on, something's missing. But I would say organisation develops through experience, with experience. So the more backpacking you do, the sooner you'll work out your own system. Thank you very much for joining me here today. That was top 10 tips for backpacking when you are on the trail. Next week, I'm actually going to break the rule I just made. I'm going to make 2 videos which will be released next Sunday. The first one is the top 10 things I take on an overnight backpack, and the second is the top 10 things I take on a day hike. They're kind of the bare essentials. I'm just going to go through my back and bring everything out and explain what it is and why I have it. But thank you very much for listening and for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next week.